I'm Chad Walquist. I'm an architect at Palantir. Today, I have a conversation with Anirudh. He leads our commercial and retail business at Palantir. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background. You have a very interesting background at Palantir.
So I joined Palantir as a forward deployed engineer 7 years ago,
Yeah.
right out of college. And the first thing that I was kind of tasked to do was I was sent to this region in the UK called the North Sea, which is sort of like big oil field for BP. And 2 weeks of onboarding, and then, part of a one-person team, tasked with kind of solving this like maintenance problem that they had. So as you can imagine, like not the easiest thing for a new grad, but that's been sort of like that was the precursor of like every other experience that I had at Palantir. And I think what that taught me and like everything else that I did after that was like, how do you become an entrepreneur? How do you kind of solve these things? First of all, figure out like what is worth solving. What are the hardest things that you can actually like tackle, that you have the capability to? How do you kind of seek help or like seek places where you can go and it's kind of like just build leverage, and then finally like deliver the value, and then kind of do that over and over again.
Yeah.
So that's been my journey, and that's led me to this place of now we're kind of building our retail business.
This is why Palantir's culture creates industry leaders. Don't miss this breakdown.
I mean, that's a story I hear all the time of that entrepreneurial spirit of like true ownership over the outcome rather than I'm just doing this thing. And I think that's really where, everyone talks about all the kind of the Palantir mafia of people that have come out and started other companies. I think there's a reason for it, is that culture of extreme ownership and entrepreneurial, like, I have to figure this out. It's going to be painful, but I'm going to get through it. Like that spirit is really kind of at the basis of it.
Yeah. And I see this over and over again, right? Like even, now I'm doing this, like people that are, owning bigger portfolios than me, they're doing it. Interns on my team are doing it. It's like everyone is kind of going through that process of like, let's figure out what the most valuable problem to solve is in the context of like the things that I'm owning. And then what is the thing that we can learn from that we can productize and like solve across the entire kind of surface area of Palantir.
And so you have a unique ecosystem of help and support and product while still growing this business at a pretty extreme rate. Like that's probably not found many other places. So we talk to a lot of customers, sometimes together. We hear all the time, like, it's really confusing. Like, what do you really do? Are you software company, consulting? What do you do? Like, what's your answer?
Yeah, so it's like, it's not that we do everything, even though that's kind of like the outcome of it. The reality of what we do is we accentuate the thing that makes a retail company unique and competitive in their industry, right? And that process of finding the thing that's kind of like their competitive advantage is what we spend the first sort of few months of the engagement on. So this could be through a boot camp or through a pilot where we say we're coming in to solve the hardest problem. What that really means is we're going in to discover kind of the biggest rock that is preventing this particular company from kind of achieving the next step of growth that they want to achieve. And then from there, it does two things. One is it gives us a view of their data landscape, their model landscape, their process landscape, and we encode all of that into an initial ontology. And number two, it gives us a view into the adjacent problem spaces that are either impacted by that big rock that we've just solved, or that are causing that big rock to happen. And then it kind of expands from there, right? So the Palantir program by the end of year one or year two looks like an enterprise transformation program, right? Which is why a lot of people say Palantir just does everything.
Yeah.
In reality, it starts off with like, let's find the hardest problem. Let's find the thing that either makes you unique and valuable in the market or is preventing you from getting there.
Isn't this exactly what modern businesses need? Most enterprise software just provides tools and leaves companies to figure things out on their own. Palantir, on the other hand, actively identifies and removes obstacles, turning complexity into clarity. It's not just about software. It's about embedding intelligence into decision-making at every level. That's why it feels like they do everything, because real transformation isn't just about selling software. It's about changing how businesses operate.
So how do you get over that from the standpoint of like, how are people transitioning? Like, what type of person do you need to engage with to like get that change?
I think so. The best sort of like partners that I've had in retail are the people who are builders. They're willing to kind of roll up their sleeves. They're willing to take a critical eye on what has not worked. If you're building 3 data warehouses that are exactly the same, but in different platforms, like clearly something's broken. So someone who's willing to kind of like take the red pill, let's call it.
Redundant systems and outdated processes don't just waste money. They hold entire organizations back. The leaders who embrace change, who are willing to tear down and rebuild, are the ones who create lasting competitive advantages. Palantir isn't just offering software. They're offering a framework for transformation. And that only works with companies willing to challenge their own assumptions.
So I know you work a lot across a lot of different retailers, a lot of different countries, see a lot of different stuff. What are some of the themes you see across all of them?
So yes, we work with some of the biggest retailers. They're very successful in their industry, in the markets they operate in. And they've been growing, right? They're growing through acquisitions, through just, pure sheer will. They have amazing leadership. But the way they're supporting the growth is just by adding more people to their core functions.
Yep.
What they really need is a way to underpin this growth with technology that goes beyond just reporting, beyond just, the sort of like support role, so to speak. Like more conceptually, like what's happening is kind of as they're growing, they're buying more and they're selling more, right? And that's sort of like the retail funnel. There's a lot that happens between that. And as you're growing the funnel, you're kind of growing the width of it. You are putting more stress in your very human-driven operations.
Yep.
You are creating sort of bigger gaps when crises happen, when like disruptions happen in those like fragile systems. And these things become very visible. When COVID happened, like we saw the cost of goods crisis.
Yep.
Last year, when port strikes almost happened, or when the hurricane season came by, these things actually change the way that the retailer, like a retail business runs, and it exposes these gaps very clearly. And in those moments of clarity, when like the leadership's like, okay, we need something between our like data warehouse system and our operations, that's when like we get the call.
The pattern is clear. Rapid growth without a technological foundation creates fragile operations. Retailers that rely on human-driven processes alone will always struggle when disruptions hit. Palantir's role isn't just about filling gaps. It's about building systems that make businesses more resilient, so they don't just react to crises, they navigate through them with confidence.
So I hear a lot of these different kind of like consumer-facing things, but when we talk about like store operations, people are the lifeblood of these different organizations. Like, how are we helping on the operational side of like the people and workforce management?
So that is, what we call a hard problem.
Yeah.
When you're a store manager and you're staffing people day to day, you need to optimize for associate satisfaction. So make sure your people are happy. Customer satisfaction, make sure people coming into the store have a good experience. And efficiency of the workforce itself. Like you don't want to over roster, etc. And typically the problem has been like pick one.
Yep.
That's what most store managers is like. You pick one out of the 3. We solve all 3, and the sort of like behind the scenes, what that looks like is a series of optimization models that look after your demand at a store level. Again, very, very granular store department, every 15 minutes kind of thing. They look at the preferences of your associates. So what are their desired shifts? Which days can they work? What kind of departments do they prefer working in? What is their like personal growth goal, etc. And then, of course, what are the sort of customer, like what is the voice of the customer saying? When are they coming into the store? Is there feedback from the customers directly that we can use to incorporate into our rostering programs, etc. And we crunch all of that data in the platform and then surface very simple, actionable insights to the store manager to say, look, these are the recurring opportunities that the system has identified in your store. Click these buttons and it's kind of like automatically gets orchestrated down. Behind the scenes, again, it's a systems integration problem.
Yes.
As you can imagine.
Traditional workforce management tools focus on either scheduling or efficiency, but Palantir takes it further. By integrating associate preferences, customer feedback, and demand forecasting into one system, they create a dynamic, adaptive workforce model. The key isn't just automation, it's precision. This is what enables retailers to make smarter staffing decisions, leading to a more engaged workforce and a better bottom line.
I think that's the part that's pretty interesting here is like that automation of my business, but it's not in isolation. It's not like automate and get rid of people. It's about how do I help people get more things done. I think that's the thing that was always intriguing to me, like the customer service engine example. Yeah. I mean, like, what are people's reactions when they see that, like, aha, of like AI is actually not this chatbot. It's this workflow that helps me get more done.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The granularity and the automation interplay with each other. With customer service, this is the granularity that customer service AI can deliver is something like a per customer concierge or like a little microcosm of your entire business that you can hand to a customer that they can interact with.
Yeah.
And it knows the customer because it has access to the customer's buying history and all the interactions that they've had with the business. It knows the business because it has access to the supply chain, and it knows kind of where purchase orders are in their journey.
Yeah.
It also has access to the process assets, the state machines, the write-back capabilities, the ERP systems that actually execute the business. And because it has access to all of these assets, it can actually run business on the customer's behalf.
Yeah.
So it's not just having a conversation with the customer. That's like a day one problem of how do you build a chatbot. The real problem is the day two problem of, okay, how do I actually run the business through AI, without sort of like human intervention or using as much automation as possible.
Why have so many companies misunderstood AI's true role? It was never about cutting jobs. It's about empowering workers with tools that let them achieve more. Palantir's approach to automation isn't about replacing human judgment, but amplifying it. AI that integrates deeply into supply chains, ERPs, and business workflows doesn't just talk, it acts. And that's the real game changer.
So retail, consumer, you get an interesting flavor of kind of that front line. And I heard you a couple times already say operational. Maybe you give a flavor of the kind of things we're helping these different customers when we say operational. How is that different than, reporting and analytics? Like, what do you mean by operational in that space?
Yeah. So I think retail is an industry where it's like quite intuitive to people because they deal with retail businesses day in, day out. So like it's quite, like I relate with it viscerally every time I go to a retail store. Like I can see the operational decisions that the associates are making. Yeah. So these are things like, in the store operations context, a store manager is rostering 10 to 100 people, sometimes even hundreds, on a daily basis. Yep. How do they decide who to put on in which shift? How many people to put on a weekday versus a weekend or during peak hours. That is an operational decision, but is something that can be enhanced with data and the right sort of like intelligence behind the scenes many folds as compared to kind of just a human doing it intuitively. That is in the store ops. And then, in sort of the overall retail value chain from procurement, merchandising, supply chain, marketing, customer operations, there's operational decisions being made across that, which we're helping our partners solve.
Retail is one of the best spaces to see real-world AI impact. From staffing decisions to supply chain adjustments, every small operational tweak can massively improve efficiency and customer experience. The ability to automate these decisions at scale is what separates leading companies from those still playing catch-up.
Yeah, it's interesting as you say that value chain, because a lot of times they're not in isolation. I think that's a lot of where we bring value to our customers is connecting that value chain, because a decision over here has impacts upstream and downstream to those decisions, right? And I think maybe I'd love to hear your perspective on that value chain and how we're like really creating that connected workflow that enables that. Because I think from my perspective that's a differentiator, but in the retail space, I'm like maybe some examples like how we do that.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. It's like a highly connected and interdependent value chain. Yep. And in a business like retail that's moving so fast, every day you're selling products, you're buying new products, it's moving through the supply chain. Decisions have a knock-on effect, or let's call it a butterfly effect, right? Yeah, we're working with some of the biggest groceries globally, and they're seeing massive impact of this. So we have a customer in Australia that's rolled this out to over 800 stores, over 10,000 active users that
Oh,
are
wow.
actively using the platform to manage their day-to-day rosters. And then even for like the sort of like central planning teams, for example, a workforce management team or a finance function, having that visibility into how the frontline decisions are being made, how the store managers are actually allocating their stuff, and what can they actually not allocate, right? Like that's a problem that the central teams can solve. So things like, I need to hire or upskill for a specific type of job profile because that's what's lacking in a significant proportion of my stores. That is an insight that a workforce manager should know.
This interconnectedness across the value chain is exactly what makes Palantir stand out. By linking frontline decisions with central functions, they turn everyday operations into actionable insights for strategic planning. It's the difference between operating in silos and running a well-oiled, responsive business.
That's interesting. So it's really the connected back and forth, because you want to help the people at the edge making their optimized decision for them that also is optimized globally. But it's an interesting thing you're saying of like that also helps the centralized teams understand and get signal from the edge of the things they can go solve for. So it's really that bidirectional communication between these organizations.
Yeah, and that is so differentiated because that signal that you're getting from this kind of federated decision model is helping you not only make better decisions at the central level based on the signal itself, it's also helping you improve the models that then feed into the frontline decisions. So for example, before Palantir, this customer was using purely just a demand forecast model to forecast, what kind of like the head count per week that I need to allocate at a global level. And then how does that translate down to the stores? But then hearing the voice of the store manager and why that forecast might be wrong is actually is like a feedback loop that's going back into the forecasting. So it's it's like a feedback loop that's very human driven and like part of an operational loop inherently.
Yeah.
That's kind of being orchestrated by the ontology.
Because it comes back to, I think, a key point is really around the differential here. Is the goal out of the ontology is to make decisions versus a KPI or a metric. Because I think part of this, when you talk about this, like thousands of stores, tens or hundreds of thousands of items, tens, hundreds, or millions of people involved in these things, like it's all about the nuance and the granularity and driving those decisions across there. I think that's like a super key differentiator for us.
That's right.
This feedback loop between the edge and the center is the backbone of Palantir's approach. By continuously refining the forecast models based on real-world insights from store managers, it creates a system that's not just reactive, but proactively evolving to fit the needs of both the central and local levels. It's a perfect example of how data-driven systems should empower better decisions at every level of the organization.
Well, Ani, man, thanks for coming to Arkansas. I really enjoyed the conversation as always.
Same here. Thank you.